it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to be defined by my neurodiversity, but at the same time, it impacts everything I do, in the sense of every decision I make, every relationship I have or embark upon.
Say someone is neuroatypical, then they may look at something and see things that people who aren't don't see. Perhaps they can see value in anything that isn't seen by others, who don't think like them.
I suppose it's become a lot more easier to control, I suppose, maybe the right word, or maybe deal with or process now that I'm a bit older, rather than when I was a kid, because all these things would be happening and I wouldn't understand why I felt this way. But now I can kind of go, oh, this is because of this type thing. It's a lot easier to kind of understand the world when you kind of have an answer to it. Even though knowing that you're autistic doesn't stop it from being any harder, but yeah, it's nice to kind of have answers, I suppose.
I think to some extent, ironically, the minority of people are neurotypical, and we're on a spectrum of neurodivergence, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think you'd struggle to find someone that doesn't have. I know that's a paradox, but it's. I think you struggle to someone that hasn't had something neurodivergent at some point in their life. Yeah.
Autism is kind of like, everything is just so much more extended and kind of amplified, I suppose is the best word.
I think what isn't neurodivergency is seemingly exhibiting a normality defined by what society deems something to not pay attention to. So, which is a strange definition, but yeah, someone that blends in to society's norms. I think you defined it brilliantly earlier when you said that it's people trying to fit into a narrow sort of, well, I'd say corridor of like acceptance. That's what they exhibit, but whether they actually are neurotypical or not is hard to tell. But yeah, I think it's people trying to fit in and go unnoticed.
There are benefits to neurodiversity, because if everybody thought in the same way, it would be difficult to be creative and think outside the box. But it may be difficult to relate to other people.
So, autism sits within neurodiversity in the way that you process kind of interactions with other people and the way you experience the world. So things like sensory things, so things like textures, the way something tastes, sounds, things like that, everything is kind of heightened to you, more so than other people. In terms of how it sits with other kind of neurodivergences, maybe like dyslexia or dyspraxia, it's just kind of, it's almost like if you had a CD player and you just turn the volume straight up, while someone might hear something on, like, you know, you might put it on like a lower level. Imagine turning the speaker up to 100.
I would say there's a pretty much every aspect of life that you're supposed to conform with. There's some standard to arrive at, whether that's how much money you're earning, how much sex you're having, what food you're having. To some extent, there is a standard or a precedent set by society, and that if you're not within that specification, then you can be ostracized. I think the society we live in, has done a good enough job of making that scope large enough so that there's obviously not any criminal implications. But yeah, I think we live in quite a tolerant society, but there is that expectation in lots of pretty much much every aspect of life.
I would ask whether neurotypicality is a thing. Doesn't everybody think differently to everybody else? Are there two people who think the same? If there aren't, then is anybody neurotypical? Or is everybody, in fact, neurally diverse?
Historically, you see the benefits of being neurodiverse. Autism evolved pre-Stone Age. Neurodivergence in cavemen allowed for tribes to survive. This whole idea of, I don't know, I forgot what the word for it. When we first started living together in packs, the way the tribe would be set up was that it allowed for every person in the tribe to be good at something. So it was kind of like you thought someone was a bit weird, but they knew every kind of plant, and that meant you didn't starve to death and when it turned to winter because you had enough food, so you kind of let that slip.
I imagine it's easier to control people if they all think the same way. It's also easier to meet everyone's needs. If everyone has the same set of needs, then it's easier to meet those needs than if everyone thinks differently. Then there's a lot more to cater for. Also, neurodiverse people may recognize only some needs are being catered for while others are being ignored.
Yeah, I think people, because of the pressures of being neurotypical, I think people press the self-destruct button. It comes in different forms, physically not participating in society, but then also self-sabotage, I think, can be part of it as well. I think if you are neurodivergent and you're expected to be a certain way, and you realise that you're not like everybody else, you can self-sabotage and you can absolutely self-destruct because you feel like something's not right or you feel like you can't fit in. So you don't feel worthy of the rewards that you'd get from falling into that neurotypical way.
So definitely, I think there are benefits. It's whether or not you view them as benefits. So yeah, there are definitely benefits, just like even seeing the world slightly differently. The way I think about it is that I'm forced to slow down sometimes. If I don't slow down, I kind of burn out or I just go into overdrive. If I'm trying to see the benefits in maybe going slower, but that can be difficult, especially in a world that makes you want to go, go, go.
In terms of neurodiversity being useful, I mean it being a benefit to being neurodiverse, I'd say that if you have different people thinking differently within a group, then that group will come up with more ideas.
Living in a capitalist society where like the whole world just wants you to go, 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 I feel like definitely now post lockdown maybe as well is becoming more socially acceptable to kind of have like a smaller social kind of bubble or things like that. Those things are becoming more acceptable, more so, yeah.
If you're neurodivergent in a particular way and you're interested in a subject that neurodivergency is useful for, then you can have a brilliant life because you can think of autistic mathematics savants and artists that I saw a documentary about a female artist that could just paint brilliantly and she was autistic. It depends on the extent of what your neurodivergence is.
It's about different ways of thinking. Neuro as in brain and diverse as in a range, so a range of different thought patterns, or essentially ways of thinking, like multicolored, a multicolored brain.
I wouldn't say that the experience of going into lockdown and coronavirus was the same as being autistic, but there were parallels in the sense of kind of that uncertainty of everyday life is kind of what a lot of autistic people experience every day. So that was kind of useful for people to kind of understand in a more universal experience. And obviously there are experiences that aren't parallel, but it was kind of a good kind of stepping stone to talking about it.
And that was the conversation that kept coming up, is he's not fitting in, he's not doing this with being neurotypical. It was, you know, he's pulling someone's hair, he's not being normal. I mean, normal, the word normal was said loads of times.
I met someone in Germany last year whom I thought differently to other people. And he also thought that I thought differently to other people. I mean, we made a connection. Here's a Jane. We were at a conference and someone else joined the conversation and she thought we were crazy. It was difficult to talk with her about things which matter beyond her own experience.
And I think if you can recognise that you're neurodivergent and work out what it is that you've got, then you can use it because you can understand yourself better. Whereas years ago, decades ago, you wouldn't have had that diagnosis. So you're constantly sort of thinking, "Oh, what's wrong with me and how can I cope with it?" But once you've got a diagnosis, you can work with it. Specifically with me, with ADHD, I was like, firstly, how did I not realise that? And secondly, now you can move on for it. You can sort of work, right, that's what I'm working with. You've got a platform to go with from there. So I think it'll be good.
He said, in Jainism, there isn't always one way that is thought a correct way of acting. So in some situations, it's correct to fight or to do something that isn't correct in other situations.
I think depression and anxiety can be a symptom of neurodivergency and lifestyle. And if your lifestyle isn't marrying up with that neurodivergency, then depression and anxiety are symptoms of that. Yeah.
I think lockdown might have been a blessing for some neuro atypical people, for neurally diverse people, because it gave them, by putting restrictions around how someone could live, it forced people to be creative in order to live a different life. Of course, this might not be true for everyone, but it's a bit like the censors in Soviet and Imperial Russian literature and film. In order to get around the censor, even more creativity was required than otherwise, in order to still be published.
One of the symptoms of ADHD is on to the next. So I'll be within, I don't know if it's a type of mania, like within ADHD, but within a morning, I can come up with 5 different ideas, start off with one on a completely unrelated subject, end on another, and I'll be doing something in the house, like hanging the washing up, and I never intended to, and I'll be like, well, hang on a minute, I was going to start a business 3 hours ago, what has happened? And in between, and I'll find notes and things that I've written down or things on my computer that I've just completely moved on or completely forgotten about, but it's at such a frequency that it's causing me depression, and it intensified and intensified and intensified up until recently. I have to really manage it, and I have to work out when I'm in that headspace where I'm flying through it. And for my brain, I'll sit down to do it, and I'll be trading silver penny stocks from Canada within half an hour, and buying some plants to grow from Borneo, whilst doing a football qualification, and it's just It's madness, and it does seem to be intensifying. And I have big lows. If I do say 5 or 6 attempts at different things, oh, this will all be in one day, and none of it, and I haven't seen immediate results from one of them, I'll be down, I'll be depressed, I won't want to talk, and that will last for however long until I think I could make licorice that I really like. I can make red licorice. If I rent out the lean-to, like if I get an oven, I can rent out an oven, put it in the lean-to. How many kilograms could I make of red licorice? Where could I sell it? And then before I know it, I'm on and then I've bought all the ingredients to make licorice.
He seems like he's in prison, especially because of the bars. But to me, he seemed to be free in some way, like Nelson Mandela, who wrote that he wasn't in prison at all. It was the jailers who were in prison. He reminded me of that.
The story I constructed was mainly her self-reflective journey. I feel like it was her kind of looking out onto the world and kind of figuring out what her place in it was. Looking back now, I'm not sure if the things that kind of appeared in her hands were actually there or if she imagined them. Now I probably think that she imagined them because it probably made her life a lot easier to just kind of fantasize and kind of get lost in a world that would always accept her rather than try and be part of someone else's and face rejection.
I don't know if having depression or anxiety comes under neurodivergence, but I don't know that it does. But I think the character in the film personified depression and anxiety more than anything else for me, because it puts you in that bubble and you're desperately trying to connect with the world and you can't. So yeah, I related to the character a lot. I think lots of people would.
There's a scene when he's in front of that gate, then behind that gate, and it doesn't really matter if he's in front of it or behind it. He's the same.
I think that the place, that in itself was quite like a sensory space. So I thought it was really interesting that it was shot there because it was quite peaceful and tranquil, and I kind of feel like that juxtaposed what was probably going on in her mind as well, because it was like, I could just imagine like she'd probably go there when she felt like she was gonna like rip someone's face off or something. I kind of sensed that was kind of her safe space, I suppose.
I had a box on my head. That was empowering. Like the character with a box on his head in the film, I can view myself as separate to a conversation. I feel like this when I speak foreign languages. I think that's why I enjoyed learning foreign languages as a teenager. I felt like when I was speaking another language, I wasn't me. As if I could say whatever I wanted, a bit like a mask. You hide behind the language. You put the language between yourself and the people you're speaking to. I have a facility for learning languages quite quickly.
I didn't know if it was set now or in the past. Fusions of like, the traditional Victorian wear and then like the bubble wrap headdress, which I understood in the sense of sometimes it's better to call yourself weird and be like put yourself out there as the weird person before anyone can call you a freak. Maybe that's kind of the image I got out of her. It was kind of like, I'm going to reject everybody else in the social convention before it can reject me, I suppose.
It just showed in a music video form how I felt at times in my life. When you do feel ignored or you try something and it doesn't work. It's sort of related to failure as well. And yeah, sometimes you do feel disconnected and on your own. It reminded me of like solipsism. The scene is where you can't truly communicate with anyone.
I didn't pity her, but I just felt a bit like, why she seems quite angry at the world, but kind of like a silent anger, you know, like when it simmers at like the base and then it all spills out type thing. I don't know, just like she was alone and the only thing she had were her like little trinkets that she'd held. And
I was quite shy until I was a teenager and started to learn to speak other languages. I mean, I'd say that changed my personality for the better.
So I don't tend to tell anyone about my ADHD. I can use coping mechanisms now with a diagnosis that have helped me, and I know what's going on in certain situations. Whereas before, why am I feeling like this? I should be fine. I'm like, oh, it's this, and this. And